Welcome back to Let's Talk About It, where the conversation is getting real. Today's topic, we'll be talking about how to have difficult conversations with our parents, something that I think is very overlooked, something that's not talked about, and of course, we're going to talk about it. So a few things before we dive right into it are some notes that I think are very important if you want to have a conversation with your parents about something. Go in with a plan. So if you want to drastically change something, I say have a plan of what your next steps are going to be. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I think just having that will give them even better reason to want to hear you out. Another one is have a valid reason as to why you want to make the change. I think that's also very important. You don't want to go in blindsided, so have a reason for not only them, but for yourself. I think it's important to know why you're really doing something. Another thing to think about is it's going to take time. If it's something you want your opinions on from your parents or someone you know that's really strong, take time. You might not get the answer the same day, which goes for prepare for anything. You might not hear what you want to hear, which is very likely may happen, but we just have to prepare for it and keep going on how it would. So conversations you could be having could deal with finance, could deal with living, could deal with school, all choices that we'll have to make sometime sooner or later. And I think it's very important that you not only hear from me, you hear from a parent as well. So for this discussion, I thought it would be a good idea to have someone on who is a parent really close to me because he is my parent. He is my father. Michael Damon, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Hello, everyone. How are you?
So today's conversation is about how we can have difficult conversations as young adults or even teenagers with our parents and have it be a good conversation, not something where it's a argumentative conversation. Both sides are listening.
Okay.
So listening to some stories that my friends have told me, stuff that I just thought about, I've gathered some questions that I thought would be best to ask you to get your opinion on it.
Okay, I'll do my best.
So the first question is, when it is a serious conversation, so for example, some of the things are discussing finances, if you want to get your own credit card, if you want to start your own bank account, there's living, if you want to live on your own, move out, stuff like that, school. This is all stuff I feel like we've had a conversation about before.
Right.
And it was a good conversation that led me to where I am now. Why do you believe that the first response that parents give is no, instead of hearing the child out?
So let me see. I think like there's a couple things to take in consideration because, like parents isn't like a type of person. It's like there's parents who have all these different background experiences, ways that they were raised and all this other stuff. So, that becomes a part that plays in their response and their reaction. I will say though, like as parents, in most cases, parents are trying to be protective and they're trying to either prevent their kids from making a mistake or doing something that they think is not the best thing to be done at that time. In the position of a parent, usually because, I'm older and I've been through more and I've lived more and I've done all these experiences, we've made the mistakes and then we don't want to see our kids repeat them. So I think a lot of times, like initially, they're not hearing you because they've already like, look, I already know where this can go, and no, like it's not a good thing for you to do. And I think it really does kind of come from a place of protection oftentimes because it's like, no, I don't like really seeing that working out for you right now, or it's not the best thing that you should do right now. But it just doesn't always come out the best way. If they could listen and just kind of be able to hear and be objective and be calm about it, you might be able to still say no, and here's why. But some parents have the mentality of like, I'm the parent, so I don't need to explain myself to you. There's that. And then there are some who either probably made similar decisions and made mistakes but just don't tell you that. So then, rather than be like, well, no, because here's what happened to me when I tried it, or I don't think you should. So I think a lot of times in those conversations, it really comes down to both people being able to really let the person finish and just kind of hear what they're saying. But then in your response, if you can, try to communicate the reason why you feel that way. I feel like that's like a disarming thing when you say to somebody like, oh, like I hear what you're saying and, I may not agree with it, but, based on my personal experience, I kind of worry about this. and like putting yourself in a vulnerable position to say like, I'm worried about this, or you know, I don't want to see nothing bad to you. Like, it's almost kind of like if they let their guard down and not be so defensive, the conversation might take a different way, go a different way.
Great. And that actually touched on part of my other question, which I'm pretty sure you answered, is the reason no is the first response because it's something that they've been through and they don't want it to be the same mistake, or it's maybe all they knew growing up. And I think, you know, times are changing, things are different. And sometimes I wonder if the mistakes they made, if the discussion would be better if they shared why, like you said, to give a better reason and fully explain. So I thank you for touching on that. Another thing I noticed is some young adults or teenagers are scared to say what's wrong because they don't want their parents to be disappointed.
Right.
So what do you kind of stand with that when it comes to how to have a discussion where you can feel comfortable enough? Because I feel like it all starts with trust.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
It's like, how can you, some parents, not all, it's hard, they don't start out with trust.
Right.
They immediately don't trust you. So how do you think is a good approach in maybe wanting to have that connection, but you just know they have never trusted you, or you have never trusted?
Yeah, so that kind of took me back to someone. There's a Jojo Pa who's in our Bond to Build community, and she has a saying that she said before that I've heard and I've always kind of remembered and hung on to. And she said that pain that's not, pain that is not transformed is transferred. So when you think about the fact that like parents, people overall, you know, they have their own pains that may have occurred in their life. And if they never deal with it or find somebody to talk to about that, they end up transferring that pain on to other people or on in their interactions. They carry it on with them. And I think that, you know, sometimes you're up against like generations worth of parenting where that has just never been the way things go. And, you know, that trust has been eroded over time, and somebody at some point has to be the one to rebuild it. And then there's also just like, you know, again, you know, parents kind of being in this position of feeling like I'm right and you're wrong and you don't know anything because you're young. It's almost like they start from a defensive standpoint. So it can be very difficult, you know, as a kid to be able to talk to your parent if you know they're going to be starting from a defensive standpoint and not really listening to you. I think I don't know what the answer is, what the correct answer about how do you go about do that, because it's not like you can just in one conversation establish that kind of trust. I always just kind of feel like if you can find the right time, you know, like and approach it in the right way, tone of voice matters, you know, really being like, and it's scary because it's like if you're vulnerable and you become very emotional, it almost leaves you open in a way where if the wrong thing gets said, then it scars you and you close right back up.
Right.
So it can be a difficult thing. Maybe like, you know, even as an adult, I think back to some stuff and it's just like, yeah, there's some conversations that are hard to have, but maybe first trying to find out who you can have them with, so that you can at least kind of get out what you need or address whatever it is that you need to have it with. So it may not be your parent, but at least being able to have somebody else that you can talk to that's going to kind of help you at least work through that process and talk through that process and maybe give you some other perspectives. You know, so like I had things that, you know, I wanted to talk about with my parent, with my mom, for example, but I would talk to friends first and I would talk to multiple friends and get different perspectives. And that process of going through that almost kind of gets you to a point of acceptance and comfortability with it, where it's just like, you know what, this is just kind of what it is now. You could talk about it from a different point. It's different talking about something in a moment where, you know, you're not on solid ground and you are insecure about it, as opposed to talking about something from the point where it's like, you know what, like this is my reality of what I'm dealing with, or this is the situation right now. There's a different tone and there's a different energy to it. So that's a tough one. I don't know if there's a one answer for it, but I would definitely say talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And maybe find a few people to talk to so that you can get to a place of comfort to have that conversation, that difficult conversation when you need to.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of these are going to be direct answers, but it's always something that somebody may need to hear to
Right.
know, because I know I will sometimes personally, if I'm like trying to figure stuff out, I'll talk to like my friends first if it's about a certain thing, or I'll talk to you first, I'll talk to mom first. It'll be different areas where you go to someone.
Right.
And something I mentioned that I'll mention earlier in the video was that plan. You want to have a plan when you bring stuff up, which I believe at least makes conversation better. If you have a solid reason why, what you're going to do, like the steps. I feel like in the past, the conversations we've had, for example, with school, leaving my third semester, it was okay, if you leave, what are you going to do?
Right.
And so the plan was work and go from there. And that's what it has been. And I think it was a pretty simple conversation, because I think a lot of us, we know that we are, depending on how old you are, we know it's our life at the end of the day.
Right.
And that the choices we make, we'll have to deal with. But it's still something that we want to consult our parents with. But it's the figuring out, do I do what my parents said, or do I do what I think is best for me?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's just kind of part of adulthood, of gathering information, evaluating the information, and then make a decision. So, like that just kind of makes me think, well, maybe one approach to that could be going to the parent or whoever you need to talk to and just saying, look, there's something that I'm thinking about that I'm not sure of, but I've kind of been thinking through the process, and I want to tell you what I'm thinking and then hear your thoughts. So it almost is kind of like, it's presenting the same information in a different way, but it's kind of disarming them in a way too, I feel. Or at least kind of getting them in a listening ear, so you're just like, there's something I'm thinking about and I want to talk about, that is important to me. I really value it's almost kind of like you have to edify in a way, like, let me put you on a pedestal
Right.
and have this conversation. But as an adult, sometimes even in the real world, you have to do that when you're talking to people,
And what are some factors that you think make a healthy conversation? Like, that if you were watching someone have a conversation, what would it look like? What would it sound like?
So things that come into play, and there's a lot of like nonverbal things that are part of conversation and communication that, as someone who has come from a field of working in customer service and sales and all this stuff, I'm mindful of it. But some people don't have that kind of training, and they're not mindful of the unspoken communication that they're giving. So body language, are you standing like in a defensive position, or are you more open and relaxed where somebody who's speaking to you feels like you are listening to them? Are you paying attention? So that can go either way. Eye contact, not doing other things while the person is talking, those are paying attention and kind of at least look like you're listening are good signs of healthy communication. Facial expressions, tone of voice. So like, I feel like a lot of things could go a different direction if we were more mindful of our tone of voice. Because in sales, we learn how to talk in a way that's going to make people feel happy and blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
But then you can also be like saying the same thing. Well, we learn how to make people feel happy. Like I said the exact same words with totally different tones,
right.
And it can trigger somebody in a certain way depending on how you deliver it. So I think you just have to be mindful of the unspoken things. It's not always about what words did you use. It's really more about the tone of voice. What was your body language? What were those things that you were doing that was not the spoken word?
Okay. Yeah, I think those are all very good notes and things I've taken in, especially when you said the tone of voice, because we have that tone of voice when we're talking to specific people to go up a pitch. It can go down a pitch. It can change all the time. And I look back on like conversations I've had, and I'm like, I wonder if my tone of voice was off now, or if that's why like the conversation didn't go how I wanted, because I was doing something and it escalated the entire situation.
Yeah, like I've heard conversations like that. We'll be talking, and then because depending on how your last thing was with the person, you might answer the phone and just be like, yeah. So like that person could have been in a totally happy mood, ready to just really enjoy talking to you, but just being like, yeah, as opposed to, yeah, right. Like, hey, totally changes the way that the conversation is going to go from there. So I think it's important to just kind of be mindful of that. And also, like, if you cannot carry, like, a lot of times people carry baggage into the next thing and it kind of builds up. So again, that's that pain not transformed becomes transferred, and it ends up building up over time. Like, there's some people that I've had relationship with, connections to, friendships with, where it's just like every time you interact with them, it builds up and you just get to the point where you're just like, I can't do you.
Yep.
But then that's just a sign that, okay, maybe this is just somebody you need to not have into your life if you can't get past whatever happened. Because then there's other people who can do similar things, and you just be like, oh, it's whatever. It's not serious, and you let it go.
Right.
So a lot of times it's us, but you just have to figure, and that's why it's important to just kind of keep the right people around you with the right energy.
That will definitely impact a lot of things going forward. So our final question that I have, if you could leave some advice for parents, for young adults, anything that'll get them going, that they have a safe space, take these notes into consideration, having these conversations, because they're conversations that you may need to have when it comes to being in control of stuff, like your finances, your living, your school. That's all stuff that at the end of the day, we have to deal with. Us as individuals, we all have to deal with the choices we made that are going to lead us to a path in life that we took. So do you have any lasting advice for anyone out there who this might have helped them and they just need that final last say?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll first kind of speak to who your listeners are. And I would say for like the young adults who are listening, teenagers who are listening, parents aren't perfect. And they are also people who had like experiences that made them the way that they are. Some people are aware of how they became how they are, and some are totally unaware. And to them, that's just like, this is my reality. This is who I am, and I'll never be anything different. So just being able to kind of like take yourself back for a moment and kind of think about who it is that you're speaking to and where they're coming from. Like, if they're that type, you have to approach that a little bit differently than somebody who's going to be very kind of aware of other people's emotions and feelings and all that stuff. It's a different interaction with that. And I know it's not easy for everybody to do. Like, I know that not everyone has the best, relationships with their family members to be able to do that. But just kind of take that in consideration, and when possible, try not to take it too personal. Like, I feel like that has freed up a lot of stuff on me. When I'm talking to somebody and they act in a certain way, and I'm just like, is all this really necessary? Right. Then it's just like, oh, you know what? It ain't me. It's really about you. You got some stuff that you need to deal with. And by me looking at that situation and being like, that's on them and it's not me, like, you can then kind of determine how close or how far away, what to share and what not to share. Because not every conversation is for everybody. And you have to be really mindful about, depending on the topic and what the subject matter is, who you're going to go to, who's going to be the best person to talk to about that thing. But just don't let people put that, whatever their baggage is that they haven't dealt with, like, don't take it on as your own, and just, let yourself know, like, okay, like, that didn't go the way I want, but that's okay. I'm gonna go find somebody else to talk to. From the parent side, any parents listening to this, is like, you have to understand that, your child is becoming an adult. Just because they turned a certain age doesn't mean the adult switch turned on and they can do everything and know everything, even if they act like they know everything. So it's like, give some grace and allow some room for error. That's been something that's been difficult for me, but I know that it's necessary. It's just like, part of me like wants to be protective and prevent from error from happening. And then the other part realizes, like, if I think back to how I became who I am today, it's because errors were made and I learned from those errors and, made adjustments. So, as parents, we have to allow some room for error, and parents, a lot of times they'll just be like, well, I know if this doesn't go right, then who are you gonna be looking at to try to fix it? So, and some can and some can't, so that's the other thing too. And that goes back to that whole protective thing. It's just like, I want you to make the best decision based on what I think, but you, in the end, if you are going to be being the young adult, you're going to be the one to say, like, well, it's my life and, it's my error to make, and then it's my life and I can just do what I want to do. with that, you have to accept that it's going to be your responsibility to deal with whatever the
Exactly.
consequences of that are.
Mhm.
So it's double-sided, and you have to really kind of take that in consideration, because as adults, that's what we have to do oftentimes.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, I just had this thought that all the conversations we've had, especially when it comes to like financing, because I think that's like one of the biggest things about adulting is getting your finances together.
Yeah.
So I think
Adults still struggle with, like, it don't even matter.
exactly, because I just remember all the times where I'd be struggling and I'm like, I think I just messed all of this up and everything. And you'd reassure me that you still make mistakes. You tell me things that you did in the past. And it may not seem like I was like listening at that moment, but I was. And I took it in. And it helped just knowing like you went through the same thing.
Right.
And knowing, okay, so I have knowledge that it's a possibility that it could happen. Let me try my best to avoid it, but still do what I need to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, like, I think shared experience is a way for people to be able to connect and bond with each other and kind of understand each other better. And a lot of times, a lot of parents are closed off and they don't talk about their childhood, or they don't talk about the stuff that they've done wrong. So I think, like, by sharing those things and kind of admitting, like, yeah, like, it may look good now, but it wasn't always smooth sailing, and sharing those stories not only gives an opportunity for, like, your kid to understand what you went through and kind of, what groomed you to be the way you are, but it does kind of like break the barrier a little bit and make you more relatable. So just knowing that, you may go through similar things and your parents gone through the similar things. I just feel like that kind of just also closens the relationship a little bit more too.
Yeah. And I think something for the young adults out there, teenagers out there, we're still watching our parents grow up too. Just as we're growing up, they're growing up too. They're still making decisions. So we can't expect them to be perfect at everything, just like you can't expect us to be perfect at anything. But we still need to take into consideration they have a bit more experience, but they are still learning as we're learning. And like I said before, times are changing. So we're really all learning at the same time.
Yeah, always. And it's funny too when you say times are changing, like, times are changing, but a lot of human stuff doesn't.
Right.
It's like the people part is the same. All this stuff is changing around us. But, and that's the thing. Every young generation feels like they the new and know the new, and that the parents don't know. Like, every generation goes through the same thing. So, 20, 30 years from now, there's going to be some younger people than you who will be looking at you like, you so outdated. You still come on Snapchat. And they like, what?
Yeah, I noticed even with that, so many people are off of Snapchat now, and I'm like, oh, okay. It's like the Facebook.
That's how it goes. Those are the changes.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining on Let's Talk About It. I think this is a great discussion that needs to be had, that everyone out there needed to hear and needed to be discussed. Another thing that is not always as discussed as we wish it would.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on. Thank you for giving your input. Thank you for being a good role model for me. I think our bond is definitely there. We work together.
Right.
Like, it's a instant thing that a lot of people like know us for as a duo. So I thought it would be good to have you on to discuss how we, I believe, over the years have made it work, and how it's shown to now how we both have like our lives, but we still like see each other, talk on the phone, stuff like that, or at least text once a day. But we still have that work side as well.
Yeah. I'm pleasure. Glad to come on and hope this information helps somebody. And mutual respect is a good foundation for any communication. Just having mutual respect is a good starting point.
Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in to Let's Talk About It. More info is coming soon. Don't forget, an ebook is being released soon. More information will be posted on the Instagram and Facebook, and a video will be going out about it. Thank you so much.
All right. See ya.